Part 2, Lesson 9-3 for Algebra 1. Solve the quadratic by graphing. Round to the nearest hundredth. Draw a sketch of your graph. So what we want to do for question number 1 is get this plugged into our graphing calculator. So we're going to pretend that this says y equals instead of 0 equals. So we pull up our graphing calculator. We go to our y equals menu, make sure our stat plots are turned off, and then we add it under our y sub 1 menu. Then we can hit graph. So I'm happy my graph, I can kind of visualize where my roots are. I can't tell if they're whole numbers or if they're decimals, but the calculator will tell me that. So it says hit y equals, type in your equation, select graph. Now we're on to the purple. It says select second, trace, 2, and follow the directions from the previous slide. So I'm going to hit second, trace, and I'm going to number 2 to find my 0. And we anticipate our answer to be here. So I'm just going to move my cursor until I'm on the left side of that 0, and I'm going to hit enter. Now I need to find the right side, so then I have to scroll past that. And then if I just hit enter again, what's really happening is it's setting the values between which the computer should find where that 0 is. So then if I guess here, it should figure it out for me. So that location is the coordinate -2, 0. But that's just one of my roots. So I have to go through that process again to find my other root. So if I hit clear, everything should go off that graph and start the steps over. Second, trace. I'm trying to find a 0. And now I want to highlight the left side of this 0. So I'm going to scroll over until I can see it. And then looking at these values on the bottom of my screen, I can kind of tell where my cursor is. And now I can see it. So here's the left side. And now I want to get above it. So I'm going to scoot up, forward. So there's my left side. And if I want to guess, I can go back down and guess in between this section. So this is where the left side of that bound is. Here's where the right side is. And between there somewhere is a 0. So this 0 is 2, 0. So the reason you have to set a bound is because on this calculator, there are actually 2 zeros. So the first time we're telling it there's a 0 between those 2 green lines, and then doing it again, we're saying there's a 0 somewhere between this purple. So there's 2 different ways we could highlight our answer. The first root is at -2, 0. The second root is at 2, 0. So you could either use coordinate notation, or you could just list the 2 parts of the 0. So you're really just listing the first number in each ordered pair. So we'll go ahead and try this for number 2 and number 3. Pause the video while you're working, and then you can check your answers. On number 2, the 0 on the right side is a whole number. It is at 1, 0. The root on the other half is at a decimal, so it's good that we used our calculator instead of trying to guess where that was. Number 3, if we just look at the graph, you can kind of tell that's at 0, 0, but we should check to make sure that it's not a decimal. So this is us demonstrating graphing to find our zeros. If we go back to using our other skills, number 1, we could solve algebraically. So you could subtract 20 or add 20, divide by 5, and take the square root. And number 3, you could also do algebraically. Your first step would be to divide by 7. Second step would be to take the square root. But number 2, you could not solve algebraically. The reason for that is if you added 2, you could get rid of that, but then you would still have that 3x in there. And that's where, in our lesson 9.4, we're going to have to get into factoring. This concludes my lesson 9.3.